This is Flowers on the Stage.
My dad was always someone who, I didn't appreciate it when I was younger because he was always just a super hard worker and kind of a strict dad. But as I grew older and we've become really close, especially now that he's retired, the work ethic and I'd say the discipline that I have that comes from him. And for me, just life experiences have really like dictated my path to really like influence what I do. I remember like when I was right out of college, I had a roommate who went into engineering and just like seeing someone struggle in a field that they didn't like, they ended up not doing engineering and going on and doing something completely different. And at the time I was studying architecture and really didn't like what I was doing and was in a kind of a rut, like trying to figure out what to do with life and like seeing people like changing career paths and like experiencing things like that through friends or just mutual acquaintances that I've always known has always been kind of inspiring for me. For me, I always say like I wish I would have gone into music school when I was younger, but like I'm very happy with the way everything turned out because I do think that I learned a lot of hard work, and I really learned good discipline from doing everything I did and until the point where I got inspired to go for music, and I feel like I've been able to apply that to a career path that I really enjoy. I always try to stress when I used to teach a lot of music, like you can learn from anyone, doesn't matter if it's music or if they're not as good at you at whatever it is you're looking at someone do, using people's experiences and kind of getting inspired by it, I think is something that I've really tried to always do. And I think that's really helped me to get to where I'm at.
Amen. So, hey, Hit Snacks just came out. You're doing a record, big record, world-class production. Love to hear about it. Love to hear about kind of the thinking that went into, making the project, how you made it, and yeah, for you to tell the
Yeah.
world about it.
Well, super excited about it, man. It was I met a lot Ben Suarez, the guy that started the band, his fiance Kara, she is a singer, great singer, and they had this project and I started playing with them a year ago. It was they had just moved to Denver. They had played and they're from the Baltimore area and they put together a project with a bunch of other great musicians and um in a year it went from just a project where we didn't know if we were just doing a one-off hired gun show to like, hey, we're going to go in the studio and record a full-length LP, and it was kind of interesting because it was all done super quick. Pretty much around like November, everyone expressed a little like interest in helping write songs, right? So this kind of turned into all of us being like from like, oh, we're just playing in this band to like, oh, hey, we're actually helping write music for it. And just the scheduling that we kept up, I'm so impressed by because we went from November having pretty much one song out of the 8 that we recorded and released. And then the studio session or the studio time was at the end of January. So in those 2 months, we wrote all these songs. A lot of it was ideas that Ben already had, and then a lot of it we all kind of like helped him develop or had some songs ourselves. And we went into Colorado Sound Studios, which is an incredible studio here in Westminster. Didn't even know it existed, and then we toured a bunch of different studios and fell in love with the producer there. His name's Steve Avedis, and he's recorded that studio itself has recorded crazy amounts of clients from like D'Angelo to like Eminem to like The Doors, John Mayer. Like the client list was insane. They still had the original Moog that they recorded the real Slim Shady synth bass line on. Like it was awesome. Like for me, it felt like being at a kid at a candy shop, right? Like I was seeing all the really nice consoles and really nice equipment. But the producer was really what sold us. He was very much, you go tour a lot of studios and a lot of them really try to sell you on their gear in their rooms and they show you like all the equipment they have. But when we went in there, obviously they did that too. But talking to the producer and his methodology and process about going around about recording the album, At that point, we already had some demos to show him. So I mean, he was, I think, the only one that asked to see any of those, right? Out of all these other producers we talked to. So like his level and attention to detail that we noticed right away was something that really made us want to go with him. And that's like, I mean, I used to have a home studio. I'm very much like a DIY, record and produce your own music kind of guy. So for me, it was the first to be able to work with someone at that level and at a studio that had that nice of gear and just had like that impressive of a client list. And I think it really showed, you know. He was very much let us do our, we were very prepared as far as like songwriting wise, but he gave us a ton of good suggestions, had an insanely good ear. He was just one of those guys that wouldn't just let anything go if it didn't pass his level of his standard, right? And a lot of times it happened, you know. There was a couple of times where I was like, even on my guitar solos, you know, I might have done a weird note that I thought sounded cool, you know, and then he's like, I don't know, that didn't sound great. And like it's nice and refreshing to step back and not and be like, you know what, yeah, like I get that I was trying to do this maybe like cool, like weird scale and be a little impressive, but like does that actually help the overall sound, you know? And like having someone that I felt like I trusted, and I know a lot of the other members in the band felt the same way, was really cool, you know. And you know, at first I was like, yeah, this is a great album, probably some of the better work I've ever been a part of. But I didn't know how that was going to translate. You know, you release a lot of records and a lot of music, and a lot of times, you know, no one hears it, no matter how good it is. So the response has been really cool. You know, it's been a month since the first single came out, and I think today or tomorrow it should hit 25,000 streams. The numbers have been way better than a lot of other projects that I've been in, and I do think um, Ben having, back to kind of what I said earlier, being a good leader and betting on himself and on the sound that he believed in all of us being able to achieve together really created a product that now is reaping the rewards, you know, and we're seeing a lot of traction on a lot of our songs. It was, yeah, the numbers have been kind of crazy in the last week because the album came out. We had two singles prior to it. So
We'll have a link in the description. Check that out. Who was the producer? What was his name again?
his name was Steve Avedis. That last name is Avedis. And then the studio was Colorado Sound Studios. And great place. Everybody was awesome to work with. It was also only like 10 minutes away from my house. So that was a great plus, you know?
Dude, I gotta catch a Hip Snacks show live one of these days, ASAP.
Yeah, we got a lot. We got a busy next few weeks coming up.
This is Flowers on the Stage, a podcast about being creative and finding success. To support it, please check out our sponsors, New Belgium Brewing and Thrax CBD. And now, back to the episode.
In your wildest imagination, how would you envision your life as an artist? Like what it looks like 30 years from now?
Ooh. Well, it's funny because I do put a lot of thought into this. And the one thing I always do when I think about it is always think of several different paths because, you know, life is just crazy. You know, any certain relationship or decision you make can take you down a different path. So I always try to think of, as an artist, what could I be doing in 30 years and what that looks like. And every time I think about it, it's all over the place. You know, I've thought of me potentially being just a guitar player for a national touring pop artist or something like that, where I'm not writing any music. I'm just working as a gun. I've also clearly envisioned all the projects that I write a lot of music and spend a lot of time into progressing and flourishing into successful careers. So those are kind of the two different avenues I've always kind of looked at. I like to stay realistic, you know. I'm always looking for I obviously the projects that I invest a lot of my well, I really invest as an artist in. I always want this to do well, but I also always want to keep my ear out for anything else, as well as not necessarily strictly always guitar performing. You know, as you know, I do a lot of different things in the music industry, whether it's marketing, promotion stuff, or even playing other instruments, as sometimes I like to play. So it's kind of how I envision it. But to give you a little bit more of like a specific answer, really, man, doing the same thing I'm doing now, and like working hard at throwing shows, promoting shows, and writing a lot of the music. And really, one thing that I really have gotten more into in the last year is helping other people direct their vision into a show. I've worked a little bit as a music director in a couple projects, and it seems like it's a very fitting role for me. You know, rather than being the person that's up there in front in the star, I think I offer a lot when it comes to organizing the whole performance, thinking of different arrangements and different musical things that a lot of times are needed, and a music director tends to do. I think that's really where I kind of feel like I fit in the best, and where I feel like I've always, I just feel like my skills are kind of best positioned for that role specifically.
I love it. It's wild how like getting into music professionally, getting to be a professional musician, like there is so the opposite of cut and dry. Like there's a million ways to do it, and you gotta kind of plant seeds in these different gardens and like kind of divide yourself amongst them. And to see like, so you're a perfect example, right? Like not only are you a songwriter, guitar player, like a musician in these different avenues, but beyond that, like just working in the industry, music director, like kind of got to do all these things as you're getting into it. Like I'd love to hear you kind of zoom out and take me and anyone listening to this through the story of you. You know, I know we've talked about your Radiohead concert moment and like just falling in love with music as a thing and going. I'd love to hear you talk about going from there to then going all in, like, okay, I'm gonna make music my career.
I've always loved music, you know, from when I was really, really young. I've always connected with it. I had older brothers who moved out when I was pretty young, so I spent a lot of time by myself when I was younger, trying to play music, but really as a listener, I always really connected with it, and without even really being exposed to too much live music. You know, I listened to a lot of music and really dug into albums for the music, and just like as a musician, as a young musician, I always was fascinated by it. But then when I was about almost 18 years old was really the first time I ever got exposed to a lot of live music. And that just kind of opened up a whole nother world for me, because before that, music was always just a hobby, something that I was in love with, but had never really seen what it really is in person, you know? I just knew it as having my iPod and listening to all the music I downloaded on LimeWire, right? So then when I started going seeing live music and I got older, moved out of my parents, went to college, and got exposed to a lot of concerts, and then by nature started meeting people that played concerts at more local shows, and had a lot of friends who started having like dipping their own toes in the music industry as performers. That was really what at that point, honestly, I wasn't even playing that much music. I was in college, busy with, I was studying to be an architect, all the other things that go along with college life. So I really got, it's almost like I got connected to music again, but from a live perspective when I was in about 18, a little bit older than that. And that really drove this whole, I guess, just goal to put myself in that situation. I seen friends performing and thinking, you know, like, what does it take to really put something together like this? And really, with it all, really a big part of it is always luck. You know, I happen to have been friends with the right people at the time. A good friend of mine that you are also great friends with, Jake Gus, was someone that I had met in college who also had a similar, I would say he actually probably had this happen to him a little earlier in his life, but he had that same drive to want to be up on stage. Um, and we just happened to meet at Ohio State, and that kind of turned into a partnership that really got me going in the industry. And once I kind of got in there, I knew that's what I wanted to do, regardless of whether it be on the stage side of things or on any of the logistical side of things. Once I kind of got into the music industry, there's really hasn't really been any looking back, and I'm actually approaching about 10 years of that. This fall will be 10 years of me deciding to really go full force in the music industry.
And you'd say like the backbone of it all for you has just been you love live music.
Yeah,
Like that's
I
just
think
it.
I think love just music, you know, that I think that's the backbone of it all. And then getting exposed to live music after already having been a very avid music listener, I think was a big part of it for me. Because uh, when I started going to live shows, it really just became more about the music for me. I never really did it from a social perspective, which I actually, if anything, I probably prefer the non-social part of it, of going to shows. You know, like I just love being entranced in the music. So I think that was the big part of it, that combination of years of always listening to music and then having that love for music and then later on being exposed to the whole live side of things made things really click for me.
And then zooming in, like, you mentioned getting to do some musical directing now. And maybe you can explain what that is for anyone listening who may not know, but like zooming in at your approach to music and, all the different dynamics of it that you may or may not be connected to, whether that's like super tight rhythm that's entrancing or space, like these different aspects of music. Would you say that there are any elements of music that you're most connected to or moved by, or you think might be kind of overlooked, like by too many musicians?
Yeah, you kind of hit it on the head, man. I think dynamics and really just building tension and release, which a lot of it has to do with dynamics and whatnot, is probably what I would say gets the most overlooked a lot of times. We get very caught up in people's like natural ability to play fast or sing high notes or do all sorts of things that are also really impressive, right? But it's funny. I've always played in. Typically, I've played in projects or been a guitar player that's more known for doing a lot of lead stuff. But some of my favorite bands are a little bit more simplistic writing. You mentioned Radiohead earlier, and I've always been in love with that band just because of the little detailed things. You know, they will have that random like, oh, on that one third beat of a measure, he's actually gonna hit the kick again or something like that, and like it's little random things that happen once in the song and little details I've always really enjoyed. And I think a lot of it for me personally comes from doing a lot of producing. I've always been really into producing on Ableton, all sorts of genres, whether it's just for fun, whether it's for someone that hires me to produce or putting out some music that I produce. I've always loved the attention to detail that you get when you're doing so. So when I get to see that translated in like a live band, I love that. Little very tight pocket grooves that might seem simple to you when you just hear it, but then when you see it live, you notice that it's actually two guitars in sync going back and forth. And little things like that, little details like that, I think are really some of my favorite things, along with vocal harmonies, which I am a sucker for. So that's another thing that I think sometimes gets overlooked a little bit and really is impactful.
Hell yeah. Jumping to the side a little bit, I want to talk about you and like being a musician. You don't get to kind of, work from home alone behind your laptop. You've got to mix with people. And
Right.
like I want to jump to the side and talk about that. What personality traits would you say you most appreciate in people you work with?
I would say passion. It's funny. I never really thought of that too much in the music industry, but passion. I think when I can talk to somebody about, and even if it's something that I'm not personally that knowledgeable about, when I meet a horn player, which I know nothing about playing horns, and I can see that same passion uh, for the instrument, for the performing, for the music. I think those are some of my favorite relationships that I've kind of developed and in the music industry, and even sometimes passion, not necessarily for what we're working or what we're playing in the gig. Sometimes just you meet a musician that loves a certain artist that you also love, and then you bond over that, which I think yeah, people that have really the passion for it for me is big. And then also I'm all for taking it very serious because I take myself very serious in the music industry, but I do love a good hang, when you do spend a lot of time, like your gig days are long, whether you're doing a show at a theater or doing a wedding gig, it's a long day. You show up for sound checks early, you have a lot of downtime. So whether it's, some people are serious and don't like to talk much, and that's fine, but just really just a good hang, someone that I can not feel uncomfortable around for the next 6 hours before we gotta get done with the night. Um, but I have noticed the people I've bonded with the most are people that are just really passionate about what we're doing. I feel that's how I am, and it makes it really easy to bond with someone, especially when you're stuck with them in the green room for 5 hours.
I bet. And being a hired gun all the time, working with different projects, like two-part question for you. One, what have you learned is just most important with these different projects for whoever's in charge to be a great leader? Like, what about their leadership is most important? And B, how do you kind of be a chameleon in these different like musical teams to kind of be what's needed from you? Like, how do you kind of not as much, you're being a hired gun, so you're not the leader, but how do you best like take leadership?
Oh, I love that. So I'm gonna answer the first one first. Really, I think being aware of everyone, and I'd say this applies to any leadership role, really, but being aware of how the people that you're leading feel. It's really easy to you're leading a group and you're in a bunch of threads talking about logistical things, about musical things, and a lot of times as a leader, which I have been a bunch in previous projects, I it's easy to kind of just take every response to heart and not necessarily think about what people are saying to you and how they might feel and why they're saying what they say, right? And what typically when you're a leader in the music industry or in a musical project like this, you're typically writing the music too, right? So it's very easy to take things personal because it's your project is so personal to you that whenever other people have ideas or maybe some sort of pushback, it's really easy to lose your cool or really just take that too personally. And I think one thing that now that I'm in positions where I'm not necessarily leading a lot, I kind of see both sides of it and really and whenever I'm in a project or any of my friends that are leading projects, I try to really to mention that to be like, hey man, like maybe that was their response because he just got some terrible news on something completely different, or maybe he was in the middle of a sound check for a corporate gig, and he didn't have the time of day, and you start thinking about, and a lot of times when you're in these projects, like if you do a little bit of digging, you can be like, oh wait, yeah, I know so and so has this going on right now, and that's probably why he was so short, and you tend to know a lot of what's going on in their schedules, right? If you're the one that's leading these groups. So I think that's my biggest thing is really try to like take their perspective and really just not just take initial responses, whether it's opinions, pushback, or even people agreeing with you, just try to always think of like, oh, well, this is how he looks at it because of whatever the reasons are, right? And to answer the second question, I love this about what I do nowadays. I work in enough projects that I have a different role, it seems like, in every single one of them, and some of my favorite ones, especially in the hip snacks, I do a lot of marketing work, and I do a lot of the help with the social media side of things and media content creation and whatnot. And I do like being able to, like you're saying, kind of be a chameleon and really put myself in roles that I know I'm helpful for, but still kind of trying to make sure that I have the bigger vision in mind of the whole project of what Ben Suarez is the guy that runs that band. He works his ass off, great guy, and I work pretty closely with him, and it's a good team. It really is nice to work with other people that are really driven and just kind of offer my experiences and what I have to offer in skills. Cause I've always been someone that like can produce a lot of things, whether it comes to like content, music creation, songs and whatnot. But I've never been the greatest at really networking outside of just meeting people, right? Because it takes not just going out to shows and meeting people and hanging out with them. It does take a lot of behind the scenes networking with other bands, you know, nowadays in the age of social media, reaching out, like connecting with other local groups and that whole side of things is something I've never been greatly motivated to do. So working with other people that can do that and kind of seeing like, oh, well, in this project, he's taking care of this. In this other project, you know, I actually might have to do a little bit more on the sound side of things when we're performing live. You know, sometimes I'm one of the more audio savvy people in the gigs, and sometimes I'm one of the least. You know, it really depends. There's so many great musicians out here in Denver that I work with all sorts of different guys that do all sorts of different gigs. So I love that, and I've never really thought of it as like a chameleon or from that word, but it is so true. It is what I got to do. You know, depending on the project, I'll do different things, and that's not even like you're saying. That's not even musically. You know, that really is like a role playing. You know, like you start thinking of dynamics of bands and different groups that you're in, and sometimes you know it's best to not say anything. Sometimes I feel like I have input to put into the situation. So hopefully I'm doing my best in in not putting too much input. But no, I have great working relationships with most of the projects that I work with, and I would say that a lot of that is attributed to a lot of the great people that I get to work with.
So then logistics and leadership aside, like just band morale, you know, such an important thing, kind of like um, hard to put a finger on it. But what would you say is most important when it comes to cultivating that?
I would say band morale is so important. I 100% agree. Very important. I'd say trying to make everybody get all in on it, right? The same way a coach would in sports, you know. And I think developing personal relationships, like one-on-one relationships as the leader in a group with every member is very important, you know. A lot of times people aren't great at communicating in a group setting. So knowing, you know, having that one-on-one relationship with everyone that you're working with and everyone that you're trying to motivate, I think is the easiest way to kind of achieve that. You tend to start bonding over things as you work together, right? So that gets easier as it goes. But I do think it's kind of hard at first to kind of get everybody to buy in. And sometimes, you know, one of the things when I get asked to join a project or get asked to get hired for a project, and one of the things that really helps me decide if I want a project to go from like, oh, this is just a one-off gig that I'll do here and there, to like, oh, this is something I want to invest more into, is seeing whoever's leading the project, whether that's one or two people, how invested they are in their own future. You know, like when somebody, a leader of a project, is really 100% invested and confident that they're going to achieve their goals, that really I think helps everybody else buy in. You know, even if at first sometimes it might seem a little, you know, I've been in projects where at first the goals seem kind of a little bit far reach, like a far reach, you know, but then you start kind of seeing like, oh no, this guy's really serious, you know. And I've seen that happen, and not just in projects that I've been, but seen it with like other friends' projects that I've seen develop. And it's funny because like you always think like, oh, this guy's crazy, but then you realize like, oh no, this guy's betting on himself, and that I think helps everybody kind of else buy in. You know, I do think every project is going to be different. You know, there's always going to be, you might have a project where only 3 out of 5 people buy in, and the other two, whether it's because they have other projects going on or something else, you know, you might have kind of more of like a fluid situation with a couple of members. And I think that's learning to be able to go with that is very important. You know, it's really easy to be like upset because one of your band members is not able to be as free because they have a bunch of other gigs, and knowing that, hey, like this is just another workaround. You know, if you were at any other industry, you're gonna have these things that you have to get over, right? And like being able to plan for things. You know, one thing I really love about the scene in Colorado is everybody works with everybody, so it kind of cultivates this uh, more collaborative environment where everybody, you know, I started playing a lot of like corporate gigs when I first moved out here because I was trying to look for anyone to play with, really. And every time I'd go to a gig, you know, everybody's like, hey, let me get your number. You know, I might need a guitar player or what, who knows what project, you know. And I feel like that is something that I see here. It is a bigger market than what I'm used to. So I think being in like a bigger market, a city that has a lot of music in it, it kind of cultivates this like collaborative, um, yeah, just like mentality, really, I would say. Everybody's knows that everybody, especially everyone that's trying to make it make it in music and make it doing music full time, you know that you're gonna have to be a part of a lot of different projects, whether it's all playing or behind the scenes or managing or doing booking, whatever, right? So um, being okay with that, is I think something that's important, and helps you be able to work around it, right? Because then you start thinking of, oh, well, we need this backup plan for when this happens, rather than just being like, oh, like I don't want to work with him because he's plays in a bigger band. It's like, well, you never know. That might not go on forever, and then now you have a great guy to work with that maybe at first was not fully committed and now is. I don't know. Things change, and everything's always really fluid. And I think um, accepting that is also something that I think helps be able to cultivate an environment of people buying in on the leader, um, everybody believing in the project.
For sure. For sure. I'd love to hear you talk about stage presence and kind of what advice you might give someone who's figuring themselves out on stage and like how to be themselves on stage and get over stage fright.
Yeah, I love stage presence. I think it's super important.
For
Um,
sure.
I think one of the biggest things really comes down to practicing slash doing your homework, and I don't mean that from like a practicing to be good enough. I'm assuming anyone up on stage has gotten to that point and really just like knowing what you're supposed to do. And like by that I mean like, like really making sure that you've got all, regardless of if you have a chart in front of you or not, just really knowing your material that you're going to play. Because if you have any doubt about like, hey, I always trip up on this one chord because I play it half step off, like if you didn't take that extra 30 minutes to really drill that before the show, um, you're going to have that doubt in you when you're at the show. So I think like step one for me is eliminating all doubt, right? And you do that by really making sure you know all the material. That in combination with that is making sure you have a great sound check. Like I really think for me it's a lot of the prep work that can breed good stage presence. If you're someone that's really shy and you don't really like, you're not too happy with your sound check, but you're like, you know what, it'll be fine, that already you're shooting yourself in the foot. It's going to be an uphill battle to really get things to be going, to feel 100% comfortable. And I think once you have that full, you're 100% comfortable with what you're going to play with, how everything sounds. I think without having that, it makes it really hard, right? Especially if you're trying to really learn to get good at stage presence. Obviously, after a while, you get used to it. Your in-ears don't work, and you go with it, right? And you've done it enough to be able to do it. But I think for people starting out, I think that's my biggest thing is really be comfortable and then start honing in on how you like to do it. I honestly, it's funny because I never really think about what I do move wise. I just get really excited about what I'm playing and just feed off of the crowd's energy. And I'm always it's always so funny to me to watch videos of me on stage because I'm like, I've never done that movement my entire life, but it's like for some reason you strap on a guitar and you put a crowd in front of me and I do movements that I've never even thought to do. So I think that's for
And
me at
that's why
least.
we love it. We love
Yeah.
it.
Well, I think that helps, do your natural, whatever comes out of you performing this music, whether it's singing, guitar, whatever you're playing, right? Um, I think that is how you're gonna feel the most comfortable and feel like yourself. I'm not. I think I've been in groups, I've been in wedding bands where they have us do like the side to side, and I struggle with that. I'm like, oh, I thought I'd be great at it, and then I realized like, oh wait, no, I'm like having to count and think of what chord to do and what side to go with, like to be coordinated with like the rest of the rhythm section, and that's hard for me, because it's like, I mean, I'm sure if I practice I could get it down, but I'm not really a dancer. So to me, I would say it's a lot of it is naturally what comes out when I do. And I will say I do like to exaggerate movements, like if I naturally bend like this when I play, like I might raise it up an extra inch, you know. But I do think a lot of that extra exaggeration comes from feeding off of the crowd, you know. It's really palpable, like the energy you feel when you're on stage, I think. And I feel it in all sorts of gigs, you know. It doesn't have to be necessarily like some of the funnest I've had on stage has been playing other people's music, or sometimes playing in projects that I'm not even necessarily that invested in, or wedding gigs. You know, it's just it's sometimes you just catch that like combination of like everyone on stage is having good chemistry and putting out this awesome moment, and then that combines with the crowd feeding off of it. And I think that feeling is super special, and I think you can capture it. Not just, I mean, you can really capture it in any performance. But it does take that. I do think a big part of it is the crowd. You know, it does take that energy from the crowd to really, I think, bring it out of musicians in the best way possible.
And if you're on stage and there's doubt about, like, you're thinking about what you should be doing, that's like totally getting in the way of that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I brought that up at first, because I'm like, it's really hard to get past that, you know. And sometimes I had a show recently at the Bluebird Theater, actually, with Boogie Lights, who's a great performer on stage. That guy knows exactly how to feed off a crowd and put together a great performance. And I was so ready for it. The sound check went great. Every like one of the bigger theaters I played in Denver, so I was like super excited. A lot of great musicians were on that gig. The crowd was there. Everything was great. I'm about to go on stage. Can't find my pack for my in-ears. So like the device that I need to plug my in-ears into, right? And I had just bought a new one recently. It was the first time I was using it. So like I had made sure during sound check to like really make sure I dial it in great. The sound guys were super helpful about it. Like I was so happy from the sound check, right? And I'm about to go on, and it's not working. And then at this point you're stressed because, oh, we're on in 10 minutes, you know, and then maybe that one shot I had earlier, it wasn't seeming like a good idea now, you know, and you're trying to get up there, and luckily, you know, there was enough monitors on stage. I said something to the sound guy. I was like, hey man, like really just kind of turn up that front monitor, because I can't find my packs, and I'm just gonna have to run with the monitor, the front monitor that was not sound checked for my liking. You know, I was just like, I was like, hopefully I can hear enough guitar on there, and I knew the material well enough, and I did, and it was like a great performance. Don't get me wrong, but and it's kind of funny because it is a testament to like what it's like to be on stage, that I would forget about that. Like it'd be like I'd be playing, I'd be loving it. At this point, you know, I'd forgotten that the sound's not great, and that I'd lost this $400 piece of equipment that I'm gonna need. And then every once in a while, I would like have a break in the song, or like I would have a song where I'm not playing much on, and I would think about it, and I'd be like, oh shit, I forgot that I forgot that I don't have that. But in my face, I'm keeping it cool. You know, I'm like, as far as
That's
anyone's
show
out there,
business.
I'm loving it, right? But found that pack as soon as the set ended. You know, everyone's trying to congratulate us. I went into, they had this like separate room where all the cases and everything were, and it was just between the cracks had falling. So yeah, an example of really how like troubleshooting happens, you know. And one thing I've always really been really adamant, especially when I'm like trying to get some of my friends who are musicians get some gigs, really doing your homework and being like prepared for things going wrong, I think is so important. You know, I've played with guys that are stellar performers, and you know, like I might try to talk music theory with them, and they might even be like, hey, you know, I don't know much, but you would never know. And they'll know the show, they'll know what to do, they know their fretboard well enough to do what they have to do. And I think that's more valuable than anything, you know. What do you do when things go wrong? You know, a lot of sometimes you're playing with a click track, you know, and if you don't start that song right away, like that click track keeps going, and you got to catch up to it, right? It's not, that was one thing that really, I would say was humbling moving out here and going from 8 years of playing pretty much music I wrote with my friends, you know, to, oh, now I'm working for someone and I have to do well because I want them to keep hiring me. But then on top of that, you have all these other elements and factors. You know, it's really easy to do a really cool guitar solo when you can improvise it, but when you got to play exactly certain notes and certain parts exactly the way they're supposed to, it really humbles you, you know. And I think it's really improved me as a musician, having to be forced to learn other people's songs, look at songs from different perspectives, you know, and kind of be forced, like, no one cares how talented you are, but do you know the material well, and are you going to perform that material well? And I think that's been humbling, and I'm very glad I've gone into that, because it's crazy. Like, it's not often that you play the same project for as long as we did with Conscious Pilot, and uh, yeah, so that was kind of eye opening for me out here, and I'm very glad that I did that, because it's definitely helped me become a better musician.
I bet. I bet. Well, hey, a couple more questions for you here. What's something that you believe now that you didn't believe when you were younger?
That's a good one. I believe that taking this is actually still going to be music related, but I believe that I talent in music, or in anything, I guess, for that matter, can be definitely built. And I say that because when I was younger, I've been in bands my whole life, and I used to play with this one guy who was tone deaf, could not sing to save his life. And then about 20 years later, maybe 15 years later, this guy came out to see a show of mine. It was Cosmosis, which you would know that is a reggae band I used to play in. And he came out to me, and was like, it was one of those, like, oh, I haven't seen since childhood, whatever. Invited me to come hang out with him like a few days later. And this guy had taught himself how to not only sing great, but play guitar and sing well. And like, being a teacher, I that really inspired me, because at the time I was teaching a lot of music, and like I told you, I used to think, like, you're either born with it or you're not. And I do still think that people are born at different levels, but seeing that hard work, and like just be letting someone, like seeing someone go from like what I would say 0 to 100 is, it, to me, was crazy. And I've tried to apply that when I do other things that aren't music. I love snowboarding out here. That's like my main outside of music activity, and I've tried to like really apply it. I mean, and I've done it most of my life, so I'm definitely not going from zero, but like just that application of like, hey, like, let me try to break this down and put a lot of effort into getting the form correct and doing something, and like what you can achieve from just practicing and like teaching your body to do certain things, I think is fascinating to me. And when I was younger, I used to think way more things were based off of natural talent, and a lot of times you don't see that like hard work that it takes for someone to do something that might be really simple for you. um, so that's one thing that I would say.
I love
I
that. It's like the power's in our hands. Like, I played baseball growing up, and the best kids when you're young in baseball are the kids who grew early. And it's like,
Right.
there's so much more to it.
No, yeah, you're right. Because there's always factors, right? Yeah, that's also always fascinating to me. Like, always thinking of like why, like what. Sometimes, even on something that you're really good at, you might not be that good at it, and you're like, what is it? And then you realize, like, oh, well, I slept 3 hours last night because I was up working all night or something like that, and like, but yeah, no, that's the sports thing I used to struggle with a lot, because I was a year younger than everybody. So I was always that kid that was like, man, I can't keep up with any of these kids.
But then you work at it, and they get a little fat, a little quicker, and
Yeah.
you're a little, and then you are quicker, and then
Exactly.
catching them down the side of the pitch.
Exactly.
Well, hey, my man, starting to wrap up here. Would love to hear like anything else you're stoked about, whether that's releases or shows coming up, or just life in general coming in the rest of the year.
I am super excited. Not music related at all, but my brother's getting married in February, and I'm super excited about that. I don't get to plan nice. It's a destination wedding in Puerto Vallarta, so I'm like, I don't know. That's just like something I
Let's
never do.
go.
My vacationing, which I get to do a lot, but it's just like always last minute. Like, oh, hey, no shows. I can join you guys for this or whatever. But so I'm really excited about that. And then, like I said earlier, I'm very excited about this Hip Snack album, and a lot of the shows that we got coming up. And then one last thing, my man Boogie Lights, who I work with and play guitar and produce with, is also in the midst of working on an album. So a lot of cool music releases coming up with him, and excited for uh, all these Hip Snack states that are coming up.
And so you're collabing with Boogie Lights as Ricks and Boogie, right?
Yeah, so that album is gonna be really cool. There's some songs that are Rick's and Boogie songs, some songs that he's collabed with other producers from around the Denver scene. He's featured some really cool singers and different. There's a singer, a rapper, there's a bunch of different horns players that are all getting featured. So it's one of those albums that is a little bit of everything. You know, so some songs will be just straight Boogie Light songs. Some of them will be some Ricks and Boogies songs. Some of them are Ricks and Boogie with a collab with someone else. Some of them are Boogie Lights with another producer. So it's cool because he's kind of bringing a bunch of different people from like the local Denver scene and not just the EDM scene. You know, like some he's featuring Desiree Gold, who's a really brilliant soul jazz singer out here in Colorado. So yeah, I'm really excited for that. And yeah, and whatever else is coming down the line that I might not know about yet.
Hell yeah, my man. Well, everyone listening this far, we got links in the description to, keep up with all that good stuff we've been talking about here. And yeah, check out that new album. And my man, Ricky, any final words for any maybe Columbus homies or Denver homies that have listened this far?
Thanks for anybody that's kept up with my music journey. More to come, and I'm super appreciative of everyone that's always supported me and all of the projects that I've been a part of.
Round of applause for Ricky. What a guy, my man. I'm so grateful our paths crossed so many years ago, and those the fateful nights at Woodlands Tavern and
Yep.
etc. And to see us now, my man. Just so glad we're in orbit together and can't wait for more of this, dude.
Likewise, man.